I honestly believe that white guilt is becoming more and more alarming and problematic, or just as problematic as black victimhood. You know, a lot of times I get on my videos and I see African American people getting on television and protesting and doing all kinds of crazy stuff that I adamantly disagree with. But now I'm starting to see more and more of this social justice warrior mentality associated to white guilt.
Before I start this exciting new video, please consider becoming a supporter. Subscribe, hit the like button, or better still, think about forking out a measly $1 a month on Patreon to show your love for disturbing trends. That didn't sound right. Anyway, the links are below. Visit us on social media. Now to the video. My dear friends, I am massively disappointed that white women run around using their feminine wiles and tears on marginalized people in order to colonialize and subjugate them. Today we are reading from The Guardian's account of white female imperialism. It appears that the only thing more destructive to Western civilization than the straight white male patriarchy is women crying. Their pale tears undermine the very fabric of our society, crushing the marrow and dissolving the spirit of people of color. In The Guardian, Rudy Hammond uses an advanced and incurable strain of identity politics to explain to us how white women use strategic tears to avoid accountability. She tells us that the legitimate grievances of brown and black women are no match for the accusations of a white damsel in distress. That the voices of women of color are getting louder and more influential is a testament less to the accommodations made by the dominant white culture and more to their own grit in a society that implicitly and sometimes explicitly wants them to fail. Forget for a moment that intersectionalism and identity politics has so poisoned an otherwise mature and considered dialogue between people so much that comments like this have become commonplace. Please help me understand how a dominant white culture wants others to fail. The humble inhabitants of countries in North America pride themselves on being the product of a melting pot. It is indeed well ingrained in our national identities. You will see in this video perfect examples of champions of marginalized people and groups wanting to reverse that trend and re-divide us into tribes. At the Sydney Writers' Festival on Sunday, Hala Ibrahim relayed the final minutes of a panel on diversity featuring writers from the Western Sydney Sweatshop Collective. One of the panelists, Winnie Dunn, in answering a question about the harm caused by good intentions, had used the words white people and shit in the same sentence. This raised the ire of a self-identified white woman in the audience who interrogated the panelists as to what they think they have to gain by insulting people who want to read their stories. You, I'm sure, won't have missed this new form of identitarian speak. This raised the ire of a self-identified white woman in the audience, much in the same way the use of identity politics attempts to redefine language. Things like calling people who identify as the gender they were born with as cisgendered. These are examples of the identity politics brand of presuppositional apologetics, a tactic used by people who are not tethered to science or reality. Put their opponents into a deep pit, forcing them to climb out of that pit, and so giving the one with the weak argument an unearned advantage from the start. Self-identified is not language used by ordinary people, but what is more disturbing is the use in this case. The mere fact that this person is self-identified as a white woman, ironically, places the author of this article into segregationist mentality of otherizing that they undoubtedly should be against. The same way that SJWs rail against, say, the media stating that, for example, a killer was a black man, automatically indicts the accused because of his skin color and sex. She continues, in other words, the woman saw a personal attack where there wasn't one and decided to remind the panelists that as a member of the white majority, she ultimately has their fate in her hands. I walked out of that panel frustrated, Ibrahim wrote, because yet again, a good convo, I guess she means conversation, was derailed. White people centered themselves and a POC, person of color panel, was told to police its tone to make their message palatable to a white audience. There is a lot to unpack in these few sentences. Rather than doing that, let me make a few sane observations. If you are on a panel that is open to the public, and if a member of the audience wants to challenge your use of words, I can't find transcripts or video of the event, so I can only go by a few biased articles online about it. This is what we in civilized Western societies call a debate or exchange of ideas. If you are unable to defend the use of words, white people and shit, in the same sentence, if you're coming up short of a good argument, then the second best thing to do, I guess, is to attack the physical appearance of the person challenging you. Think about it. I cannot be the one with bad or indefensible ideas, and you dare not challenge me when I brand you a de facto representative of a people who, by the accident of birth, are set out to silence me. Makes sense? It is interesting to note that all this fuss is made over white women crying, and I don't think there are any examples of actual tears in this article, so it's likely just overblown hyperbole. The Guardian isn't the only place to give voice to this racism. Looking at the poll, Cuba Shand-Baptiste parrots these disturbing views and remarks on the various reactions to the Guardian article. She takes issue with Claire Lehman's tweet. Can someone please explain to me why editors at The Guardian think it's reasonable to promote the idea that a white woman crying is an act of violence? Which I believe is a reasonable question, but maybe Claire's tears on Twitter are themselves an act of violence. What say you? While journalist Andy C. Ngo said that intersectionality was to blame, he tweets, intersectionality rots the mind and the heart. There, I said it. Well said, Andy. Intersectionality also hardens hearts and creates more divisive tribalism. Getting back to the Guardian article, Ruby Hamad race-splains to us, trauma assails brown and black women from all directions. There is the initial pain of being subjected to gendered racism and discrimination. There is the additional distress of not being believed or supported, and of having your words and your bravery seemingly credited to others. And then there is a type of trauma inflicted on women of color that many of us find among the hardest to disclose. The one that few seem willing to admit really happens because it is so thoroughly normalized, most people refuse to see it.
Black people who are not living a life of victimhood, we don't waste time worrying about who did what thousands of years ago. All we're worried about right now is what can we do together moving forward. Martin Luther King, all of our forefathers of this country have fought to sustain the right and the ability for us to exist together. They have done the legwork. All we have to do now is try to perfect what has already been done.
And then there is a type of trauma, we're now told, trauma from slavery can actually be passed down through your genes. You can get PTSD from your ancestors. I shit you not. This is in Teen Vogue. They are not talking about changes to the DNA. Rather, the reference is to epigenetics, a process that alters gene activity without changing the DNA sequence, or more to the point, gene expression. So there is no PTSD gene, and the reference in this article to the study by Dr. Rachel Yehudawu, who found, however you pronounce it, found unsurprising similarities between Holocaust survivors and Vietnam veterans suffering from PTSD. She makes the leap from survivors, meaning the people who experience the trauma, to heritable traits, without, at least in this article, explaining how this happens. And I would think since they're promoting this idea, they would show what process she used to make the connection, make the leap from survivors to generational. Tests in labs with mice show that traits can be passed on through the suppression of genes. Most epigenetic modification by whatever mechanism is believed to be erased with each new generation, and there are not enough studies to consider long-term effects as fact. Sorry folks, I strayed from the Guardian article again. I guess I'm getting traumatic stress from reading it. She goes on to give a few anecdotes as evidence and not worthy of inclusion in this video. She does, however, bring up as a major point something that happened at the 2018 Canada Reads debate and uses a short video clip to prove her point. She writes, "For the doubters, here is a mild version of this sleight of hand in action.
It's important for us us to really look at what book is going to have Canada open their eyes to what is happening on today. And yes, we celebrate and we heal and we kumbaya and we light.
But Julie, what about what's happening with ourselves? I mean, this is the yeah, we've got to change the world, but people are really, there are a lot of like screwed up people in the world.
There's a lot of colonial privilege.
There's a lot of people that really
this
need,
room
right?
excluded, of course.
And
this
so,
studio excluded.
yeah,
there's a lot of people that have to work on themselves. I mean, when we
there's
see
a lot of
that
people who sit in
in
their
the
cottages in their homes and don't have an experience like others and think that it's, well, you know what, let me swipe my Visa card and make a donation, but I don't live this experience. What are we doing to change the current circumstances? We just had a Pope say he's not saying I'm sorry to Indigenous Canadians when he said that in 2015. It is happening right now.
I'm not saying
it's got to change. Yes, we forgive. I believe in Jesus.
But why
do
are
unto
you
others as we shall
attacking
do
me,
unto
Julie?
you.
Why are you attacking me? No, I totally get what you're saying, and I have.
Hold on, we're live right now.
now.
Why are you attacking me?
I'm not attacking.
The truth hurts. I didn't say anything to attack you, Jeannie Becker. I said nothing about Jeannie Becker.
No, I'm just saying you're.
Did I say anything about Jeannie Becker?
I just feel that you're speaking to me like I don't believe that. I totally get what you're saying.
Let me tell you what you just said. I feel like. So whatever you're feeling, take it to the altar, because I'm not the one that's responsible for your feelings.
Notice it is the white woman, Jean Becker, who first interrupts the black woman, Julie Black, who takes the interruption in her stride. Black continues to speak passionately and confidently, which Becker interprets as a personal attack on her, even though Black is clearly talking in general terms, just as Winnie Dunn was. Becker then attempts to shut Black down by essentially branding her a bully. Unfortunately for Ruby Hamad and The Guardian, there is a complete version of this video out there on the internets to show what a pile of shit this article is. The first problem with her claims is that Julie Black interrupted Jean Becker, the crying white woman.
So how does your book address this? I'd like Jeannie to weigh on that first.
Well, again, you know, so much in the Merrill Thieves was about the importance of storytelling and remembering the stories and really learning from the elders and learning about the way it was. That's exactly the premise of this book. It's all about the intergenerational dialogue and trying to learn from our past in order to move forward. I mean, always, you know, with an eye on the past, of course, but not getting hung up on it in order to reinvent and reimagine and really move forward in brave, new, wondrous ways. And, you know, it's so much about healing. I mean, in the Merrill Thieves, there were, you know, there was so much healing that was going on all the time. I mean, that was one of the beautiful aspects of the book. And I believe this book is about those very same themes.
There's healing, then there's action with the healing. And that's the thing. You know, it's important for us to really look at what book is going to have Canada open their eyes to what is happening on today.
Let's play that interruption for you.
I believe this book is about those very same themes.
There's healing, then there's action with the healing. And that's the thing.
There is no attempt to shut anyone down, as you saw for yourself. It actually appears that Jean Becker has gone out of her way to accommodate the bully. Yes, I said bully, because it was Julie Black that steamrolled all over Becker. We can see that a bit earlier in the talk, Becker graciously shows she's able to defer to Julie's point of view without putting her down as a person of color by using white women's tears, but is able to negotiate an honest back and forth that thoughtfully furthers the discussion.
In this book, and when you talk about humanity, and you know, when Julie has all, you know, talked about what made her book, The Merrill Thieves, so wonderful. You talked about that community and that, you know, that's life. Yeah, it is. It's about love. It's about falling in love. It's about looking at each other, you know, in the eye and accepting each other, warts and all. And I think that's what we see here in Forgive.
But if we're talking about interruptions,
things for a lot of Canadians. Yeah. For a whole bunch of Canadians,
Indigenous
Canadians.
A whole bunch of white Canadians.
Yeah,
let's keep it real.
Exactly. Indigenous Canadians.
I know a lot of white people like white people.
Getting a drink of water, clean water, in the middle of an isolated community.
Maybe you can explain this combination, interruption, and identity politics attack on white people. Now, to be fair, if you watch the entire video of Canada Reads, they all pretty much are behaving like grown adults and interrupting each other in a civilized manner, which is par for the course for events like this. Except this part here where Julie appeals to the use of mockery towards Becker's feelings.
Totally get what you're saying.
Let me tell you what you just said. I feel like. So whatever you're feeling, take it to the altar, because I'm not the one that's responsible for your feelings.
But apparently, Becker, Who is white is responsible for your feeling. In addition to being part of the debate, it appears that Julie has an agenda that involves interjecting postmodernist tripe about colonialism and white domination into the discussion. Whether angry or calm, shouting or pleading, we are still perceived as the aggressors. Here's a bit of news for you. If you are angry or shouting, you may very well be perceived as the aggressor, regardless of skin color. Likewise, white women are equally aware their race privileges them as surely as ours condemns us. In this context, their tearful displays are a form of emotional and psychological violence that reinforces the very system of white dominance that many white women claim to oppose. I'm not too sure that many white women are aware of race privileges, as this is the language of identity politics and intersectionality. As far as I'm aware, a very small percent of the population are well versed in this sort of divisive and racist talk. What is the goal of these identity politics with these particular social justice warriors? Is this it?
Now, a Black Lives Matter activist has come up with a solution to racial inequality in the US. Chanel Helm, the movement's organizer in Kentucky, wrote an article making 10 suggestions for white people. The first says they should leave their property to minorities if they don't have any descendants. The list also urges readers to record people who make racist comments in the workplace and get them fired. We asked Helm about the initiative and also invited comment from political activist Jeffrey Klein.
One of the later numbers of the 10 suggestions was to essentially seek out Nazis in the workplace and get them fired. And the word Nazi has been so watered down lately that I don't think anybody really knows what it means anymore.
Let's remember where the word Nazi even comes from. It comes from Germanic people who were who proclaimed to have this superior race. That's what white supremacy is. That's what white supremacy is in the U.S. We are talking about a systemic economic barrier that prevents black and brown people who were already on this land from even obtaining land in various different ways.
The main issue we're talking about here is there's black people who've never been slaves asking for money from white people who've never owned slaves. And so it's difficult for me to be able to wrap my brain around owing somebody something when I clearly don't owe them anything. And the notion that the list of 10 things wasn't racist when all it's doing is talking about race, the list is essentially implying that black and brown people are incapable of achieving economic growth, and as a result, white people need to give them economic advantages. I think it's very racist against black and brown people to essentially tell them they're not capable of this.
I think that it's dangerous in a sense to say that what I wrote was racist or dangerous, because it wasn't in the least. And none of what I wrote was dangerous in the least. I think what's dangerous is the backlash that I am personally receiving from that.
In one of the points, you even say something to the effect of, you have hands, use them. Very much hearkening back to this overused phrase right now about punching Nazis.
And when we talk about Nazis and punching Nazis, we are talking about white supremacy. White supremacy did deal some of the most deadliest types of genocide that our world has ever seen. So we're not talking about something that's just in a 10 list of things. And when I'm talking about using your hands, because Nazis are violent.
It's perpetuating a lot of this racial tension. It's furthering the divide between races, which I think, if anything, we should be trying to come together. And it is encouraging some level of violence. And it's very naive to act like you don't think it.
Here's what I think. Tell me below if you agree or disagree. Most people in the US, Canada, the UK, etc. believe that everyone is equal. Equality is in our laws. People fought for generations to achieve that equality. And who wins when we have this hard-earned and won equality? We all do. For some, the perpetual victim is easier to keep inventing and blaming white folk for crimes that do not exist. The evidence is in this new absurdity our white female tears create violence towards black people. If we act one way, we are racist. If we act in a way trying not to be racist, this is some form of stealth racism. We can't win with people that conjure up new crimes when we enjoy a state of equality. Is the end game that whites will have to lose so that blacks wins? Is this a zero-sum game, which is insane? Think about it.
It's time for us to move forward, America. Golly, can we move forward? That stuff is old. It's time for us to come together as people, Black, white, whatever nationality you are, wherever background you come from, whether you're poor or rich, it's time for us to come together and come up with reasonable solutions for us moving forward. Can we all just get along? Only reason that there's racial division in this country because we create it, we perpetuate it. And I honestly believe that liberals in America, not the liberals of old, I'm talking about modern day liberals, are literally forcing racism down our throats. Anytime a person is upset with another person, and it never go both ways, but anytime a white person is upset with a black person, it's racism. But every time it comes to black and white issues, it seems like the left is just trying their best to create and keep this flame going. The flame is dead, man. Believe it or not, in America, racism is dead. It's only a few people trying to revive it. Only a few people giving CPR to racism. A few people giving CPR to white privilege. A few people giving CPR to some level of angst when it comes to slavery and discrimination. Quit giving CPR to it and it'll die.